Hello, everybody. We are back and we are going to have another Survivor series. And I am so excited to welcome Amy. But before we do, I want to give a huge thank you to Supporting Survivors of Abuse and Brain Injury Through Research, or SOAR, who have sponsored all of the survivor sessions today. So again, big shout out and thank you to SOAR for sponsoring these sessions. Hi, Amy.
Hi.
So I'm going to do an introduction and then I'll give a little layout of our session. So again, I'm so thrilled to have you here and grateful for you being here. So Amy's resilience and advocacy in the face of adversity is well known. Having survived intimate partner violence, she has turned her personal tragedy into a powerful platform for change and support. Utilizing her experiences, she has become a vocal advocate for intimate partner violence awareness, tirelessly working to educate communities, support survivors, and influence policy changes. And so we're going to do things a little bit different here today for this session. Amy has done a number of interviews, and so we're going to start this out by playing an interview that Amy did with the LA Times. I will say we did edit this video for content to make sure that we are not providing any triggers or trying to limit the triggers that we are providing. And again, this is not ours, but it is the LA Times information. But with that, I'm going to play this. And then afterwards, Amy has agreed to open up to the attendees to ask her questions. So after you hear what she talks about on here, she would love to hear from you, and you are open to ask any questions that you would like.
So thank you for joining us, Amy. I know you have a story you would like to share, and with all stories, the good place to start is at the beginning, when times were good.
When times were good, they were somewhat too good to be true. Jonah and I met through baseball and expos related events, and my mom had just passed away. I was not in a very good place, and suddenly there was this person who mirrored all of the things that I discussed valuing. It was very intense, it was very quick, and suddenly he wanted to move to Montreal into my condo. What seemed really charming at first quickly felt claustrophobic. I was sort of led to believe that it was my own commitment issues and that perhaps this is why you've remained single as long as you have, and why don't you let me take care of you? And then I got pregnant and things started to change pretty quickly at that point. I was definitely surprised, but had always wanted to have a child. And suddenly there was a lot of pressure from him that we should get married.
Meaning like within months of even
Yes.
meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
He suddenly had all of these stories to tell me, and it was so strange the way that it all happened.
Is he confessing to violence against those women?
Not to violence.
One thing which strikes me about the domestic violence issue as well in sports is that video seems to change everything.
Yeah.
Which makes me almost sadder than anything. Why don't we just take the word of the person who said, this person did these horrible things to me? No, we have to have video evidence.
Yeah.
You know, it's very easy to be cynical, and no matter what the person says, you're just like, yeah, but you beat the crap out of this person.
Yeah.
I don't care what you do. I don't care how many kumbayas or whatever. Is forgiveness, is that something we should strive to have, or should we not ever do that?
And I believed that that was how he felt, and I thought I was getting one of the good ones. That led to him not feeling worthy. In his own opinion at the time, I had shamed him. That led to the first incident of abuse. It was basically, well, I'm sick, I must have a brain tumor, I've never done this before, I would never hurt you, I love you, I want to kill myself, I can't live with myself. And then it happened again.
In the court docket, there were, quote, 14 incidents of violence against you in less than 7 months. The first 2 were before you got married, correct?
There were more than that. That's just the agreed upon facts. Yeah.
As this is all happening, you guys are moving closer to your wedding.
Yeah.
And then there's an incident that happens right before your wedding, right?
What was going through my head at the time wasn't, I have to call the police. It was, I'm so humiliated that the doorman probably saw this. And I have to live in this building and walk around, and these people must be judging me, and what is wrong with me that I can't leave. I have this wedding planned for a few days from now, and if I call it off, he's going to kill me. So I went along with it despite not wanting to be married to him, not knowing what else to do, and putting one foot in front of the other. Based on the way that the law works, I would most likely have to share custody with this person who was threatening my life and the life of my unborn child, and using that as a way to ensure that I couldn't leave. I realized that unless I started to document what he was doing, no one would believe me. And my concern was honestly that he was going to kill me and get away with it. Yeah, and that's a very limited summary of events.
There was one time your dog came to your rescue. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I got home, said hi to him, tried to keep it as quick as possible, and said I have a phone call that I have to make upstairs. He was so hurt that I had walked in and not even hugged him. I went downstairs, and his response was, we're gonna have a really big problem right now, with a smile on his face, and he stood up and held me against the wall by my neck. And I couldn't breathe and he's 6'4" and weighed double what I weighed, and I had no means of protecting myself at all. My dog tried to attack him, which stunned him enough that he stopped for a minute, and I was able to eventually get away. I called my friend and told her what happened, and I said, you need to call my brother in the morning and tell him, because I might chicken out, and once he knows, there's no going back. He was then arrested.
You didn't speak up at first, thought things would get better.
Yeah.
I wonder, in retrospect, would you have done anything different, or do you know now that's just how this goes and you can't really prepare for that?
Certainly there were warning signs when things start off as a whirlwind, when things seem too good to be true, they are. But the onus is not on victims to avoid abusers. Like, yes, it would be great if we all saw these warning signs and listened to them, but it's easier said than done. It's why I appreciate being able to speak out to someone who works in sports, because the way that this stuff is talked about and reported about makes it really hard for victims to come out.
Are there general lessons you think baseball can learn from your experience, whether it's the
baseball's
league, the writers, whatever it is?
Microcosm for our society, just like every other sport. And will there be blood on baseball's hands if they didn't report it? Is it enough to suspend somebody and keep it quiet? And should we be giving these abusers a platform?
What do you want people to know?
Words have really big power. We don't know when we could end up in these situations, or when our friends or our sisters or our brothers could end up in these situations. But support for the survivors is extremely important. I don't have the answers and I don't have all the resources, but everything is scarier in the dark.
Amy, thank you again for being here, but also for sharing this story. I'm just gonna, or your story, not this story, sorry. I'm just gonna look in here and see if we have questions. If not, I am gonna ask, if that's okay.
Of course.
Oh, great. So I'm gonna ask the question that everybody asks. Why didn't you just leave?
I mean, it's the question that I asked prior to this happening to me, where
Unfortunately, my thought process watching a story like that would have been what was wrong with her and why didn't she leave? And through my experience and working with other survivors, I've come to understand that it's often like asking somebody why, especially somebody with a child in my case, why they didn't leave a burning building with their child inside. I was aware from the research I had done and other survivors I had spoken to that I would be sharing custody of an infant with somebody who was abusive, who at the time I thought was out of control because I didn't understand intimate partner violence enough to realize that he was actually in complete control of me. Um, but I feared for my life if I left, understanding how intimate partner homicide often occurs at post separation. I was aware of the impacts that would occur to my child. I didn't think anyone would believe me. These things don't happen in a vacuum. When I met my ex, I left my career and went to work for him as his podcast producer. I was dependent on him financially. I had formed a trauma bond with him where he was the only person that I could speak to about the abuse. But at the time, the thing that was most pressing for me really was this baby. When I finally left, my son was 6 months old. So he was completely helpless, would not have been able to talk about what happened to him. And I didn't think I could leave. My brain was not functioning at its best. And I was just trying to survive in like 5-10 minute chunks of getting through the day, of surviving, of making escape plans and hiding a baby when I needed to, and thinking ahead certainly wasn't something that had occurred to me. And this is what most survivors say, is that, if I had known that I could leave and things would work out as well as they did for me, I might have, but my situation is very, very unfortunately rare.
Can we follow up on that? Because I know
Mhm.
you and I have had many conversations about your situation being rare,
Yeah.
and it's it's hard to word this, but your privilege in this situation, which you are not privileged for experiencing this, but you do have privilege in this. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a white, able-bodied, cisgender woman who had access to resources and had support, family support, friend support. My ex was well-known enough to get fired and canceled, but not so well-known that people continued supporting him. If he had played baseball really well instead of writing about it, I don't think that things would have worked out this way. I was able to leave and call the police safely, have the police believe me, which is unfortunately not often the case. And the police said to me, we'll press 2 charges. And when I explained that this had been going on multiple times a week for over a year, and that I had evidence, they said, well, there's nothing we can do for you. We can't go through your phone and find all of the relevant messages. I was then able to hire a digital forensic specialist who removed all the information from my phone and then said, I have hundreds of thousands of relevant messages and voicemails and recordings and videos that you've taken. You're now going to have to sit and go through them all. Here's a highlighter. I hired a criminal lawyer and spent 6 months, 7 hours a day with a newborn, and the criminal lawyer going through every text message, went back to the police 6 months later, and they said, oh, now we'll press 21 charges. I was then able to, have a successful outcome in court, get support that I needed, find other survivors to support me, and to finally obtain full custody of my child and to have my abuser's parental rights removed. So I have full, my child will never have to see my abuser again. I can advocate for others and myself, and I would not have been able to do that if I was dropping my son off tonight at my abuser's house. So things worked out very differently than they do for most survivors, and it's not fair at all.
We do have some questions in the chat. And I'll start with someone, Karen Mason.
Oh, I love Karen so much.
I'll do, yes. So Karen said, you are amazing, Amy. Thank you. What are your thoughts looking back on how the courts and the world in general responded to your story and situation?
Yeah, once again, it was really a situation of privilege because I worked with my ex, like the editor at The Athletic, which is part of the New York Times, was able to call me and say, was this a one-off thing? And I was able to explain that these are not one-off things. And they said, okay, well, we're going to fire him then. And he immediately lost all of his jobs. This went viral on Twitter to my horror at the time. And my brother called me and said, do not look online. So I, of course, immediately looked online and was really surprised that it was only support. I had people like Karen reach out to say, what can I do? And we support you. And my ex went from being somebody who had a lot more power than me to being a pariah pretty instantly. That caused there to be media attention. There was never a court hearing that didn't have reporters in it, and it caused the system to work a lot better. It still didn't work well. I still had prosecutors asking me why I didn't want my son to have a dad. And I was forced to educate person after person about intimate partner violence, about my situation, about the dangers that we were facing. But I was lucky enough that I was able to do that. And the media was immensely helpful, whereas it's often quite detrimental to survivors.
We have another question from a provider, and I think it's a question that I think both of us hoped you'd get.
Mhm.
But they said, thank you for being here. Are there any questions medical providers asked that made you feel comfortable to open up about what was going on? And what were the attributes of the most helpful medical providers?
Unfortunately, I did not have any medical providers who were helpful. I lost my GP because he told me that he would still continue to see my ex and couldn't guarantee we wouldn't both be in the waiting room at the same time. I was strangled. No one measured my neck or suggested I go to an emergency room. I received head injuries that were never looked into. No one ever asked me. The majority of medical professionals, certainly while I was in the situation, I was pregnant. I now know that the leading cause of death in pregnant women is unfortunately intimate partner homicide, not gestational diabetes, not preeclampsia, and not one doctor asked me. My OBGYN did not notice that my husband attended all appointments, came in with me. I was never alone with a doctor. I actually had another baby 5 weeks ago, and in a healthy relationship, and in going to my OBGYN, who was wonderful and trauma informed. I said to my husband, can you come in with me the first time? And he was like, I don't want this to look like, the last situation you were in. And I said, no, I want to explain it to the doctor. And he walked in with me and the doctor started chatting. And I asked her if she knew what the leading cause of death was in pregnant women. And she said, preeclampsia, diabetes. And I informed her and said, when the husband comes in, you should be asking him to leave and you should be speaking with the woman yourself and asking what's going on. And that just does not happen. It was only when someone else disclosed intimate partner violence to me that I felt comfortable enough to speak out. And that's what I experience daily still from being an advocate and working in nonprofit, is that once I share with people that I've been through this, whether it's a hairdresser or an Uber driver or, a friend of a friend, suddenly people start telling me about their own experiences.
Can you, sorry, all of it just like makes it hard to continue asking because makes you want to scream.
Yeah.
And I can see that in the chat too from other, especially our providers. I can see making comments that unreal. When you did go, and again, congratulations on the new
Oh, yes.
baby.
She's very cute. Yeah.
What did you notice was the only prevention this time that you found in the room?
Yeah, well, I spent 2 days in the hospital after having a C-section with a baby and was really like hawkish on like, are there posters? Is anyone going to ask me how things are going at home? I, spoke to nurses about it. I spoke to orderlies and doctors, and nobody had any clue. And finally, walking by a payphone, my husband was like, "Oh no, that's all they have out about intimate partner violence in pregnancy." And it was a little postage stamp size poster next to a payphone that didn't work.
that no one was going to see, and no one asked me. And just, this floor filled with women who had just given birth, all I could think was, how many of these women are experiencing this? And how many of these women are terrified to go home like I was? I was terrified in the hospital. And if someone had asked me, if someone had taken me aside, I might have disclosed, but I couldn't.
And I'm hoping that, we have a number of people on this call right now. I'm hoping all of them are going to be reaching out to the OB/GYN departments and being like, this needs to change. So I'm extremely hopeful that what you're saying right now is going to be impacting many people. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I have another question. Thank you for sharing your story, Amy from Dorothy. How did you become involved in being a voice for survivors? And how would you encourage others to become involved in the work that we're trying to do around brain injury and IPV?
Yeah, I mean, I was in a situation where this was all over the media. Every court appearance was on the news. It was, in the New York Post. It was on CNN. It was everywhere. Everyone I knew became immediately aware of what I'd experienced, and I felt a huge amount of shame until other people started reaching out, and it became really empowering. And then I realized one day that if something happened to me and my son were to Google my name, all he would read was that I was a victim and about what happened to me. And it was really important to me to take that story back. I was also working in a nonprofit, answering a hotline and getting calls from people who were referencing my story and saying, like, it's great that he was found guilty and it's great that he went to jail, but like, how is she surviving? And does she still have custody of her child? And being able to say to them, like, I'm actually the person that you're speaking of. And remarkably, things are going really well. And it was, really heartening to realize that my story might be one that might help other people to be able to leave. Also, to help people to realize that if you can safely do so, documenting what's happening to you can save your life. If I had not documented everything, the judge in my case was very clear that no one would have believed me. He would not have believed me. And I would have, again, shared custody. And the thing that I realized working with other survivors is how desperate so many survivors are to tell their stories, to share their experience, to try to help others, to advocate for others who are going through it. And unfortunately, they're not given a platform. There was interest in my story, not because of me, but because of my ex. And I was able to use that to try to do some good. And it was extremely healing. And I don't think I would be functioning nearly as well as I am if I had not been given that opportunity.
And I think I say this for many people, that so many are grateful to you that you did take this path and share, because I think it's helping so many people. And I'm going to leave some comments and in the chat from some survivors who are saying that to you in here. And I hope that you can see that after.
Thank you.
Your situation is rare, but also not rare.
Right.
And
Right.
So I think if you want to take a look through, you'll see some impact there. Okay, so we have a question. Again, Amy, this is from Sam. Amy, you are my hero. And thank you for sharing your platform. Can I ask, if this isn't too invasive or personal, did your ex have guns in the home?
He did not. He was very anti-gun, in fact. He was also very anti-domestic violence or intimate partner violence publicly. So for all I know, he does now. But no, he did not. Also, I'm in Canada, so we do have a bit less of a gun problem than you folks do, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But certainly, if there had been a gun in the home, I would not be here making this.
And I think that's part of the point that was coming, and I'll leave this up so you can read this after, but I think that was the point of Sam's question. Yeah. So from Catherine, thank you for sharing your experience. What words of advice or support would you give to someone that is dealing with that court system? And part of the question I'm going to add a little bit is, how did you safely keep track?
That was the that was the real challenge. My ex had full access to my phone. And so what I did was I would take pictures of injuries, and then I would take 500 screenshots of baby toys or rattles or hairstyles or makeup or whatever it was that I thought would cause my abuser's eyes to glaze over and cause him to, close the phone. So I would hide evidence. I kept notes of exactly what was going on, but I did so in code. So I had like certain letters to signify certain injuries or certain actions that he had taken. And I put dates on them, but I always dated everything 3 days in advance or 3 days after it had happened. So it was on this intricate coding system, and I would send it to my best friend every single day so that there was a backup of everything that had happened. And thank goodness for my best friend, because she didn't say you need to leave or else I can't speak to you anymore. She didn't say this is too stressful for me. She didn't judge me. She told me she thought that he would kill me, but she continued to be there and support me. And she was the call that I made after being strangled. And I don't think that I would be here if I hadn't found someone to share with. So documenting is important. There are a lot of IPV organizations that will keep documents for you. I keep documents for some survivors who are in these situations now, as well, so that they can have them when they are ready to leave. I would say for me, the thing that saved my mental health while I was in the situation was that every time something would happen, I would research it. So I would research stats, I would research what was happening to me, and it made me feel less alone and made me realize that this wasn't, it wasn't just the person I was married to doing this. And that if all of these other women, formidable women out there, had experienced it, perhaps it wasn't something that I was doing to deserve it.
So do you have words of support for people trying to do this? So the person asking said it's a long and isolating process. My family is currently waiting for a trial against my cousin's partner, who has been charged with first-degree murder in her death.
Yeah, first of all, I'm so sorry to hear that. But yeah, I mean, the court system is isolating, it's re-traumatizing. It is not built for survivors. Finding support from other survivors for me has been the most important thing. I now have, a huge friend group of survivors of intimate partner violence, and feeling less alone and realizing that it's a club that absolutely nobody wants to be a part of, but once you are, you're in very good company. Again, these are formidable people who are intelligent and cool and funny and wonderful people who are advocating and fighting really hard, and you can find support from them, and just one person who can support you. And I'll share my email address in the chat as well, because it's something that I try to do when I'm able to in between night feeds and diaper changes right now. But there are a lot of us out there who will help. There are secret groups on social media that I was a part of where we all helped each other to learn what to do, how to advocate, how to stay safe, and just trying to do anything that you can not to isolate, was, in my opinion, the most important thing I could do.
Thank you. And I also want to say your best friend is an absolute hero. So
She absolutely is. My wedding gift from her and her husband was a very large check. And when I realized that it was only written out to me and asked them, they said, that's for your lawyer when you leave. And that was at my wedding. And that was also incredibly,
wow.
incredibly impactful. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so we have a question from Molly. Again, thank you. When you spoke about hiring a criminal lawyer, I'm wondering how you're able to obtain this. I support survivors and have explored retaining criminal lawyers and have always been told that it isn't an option, as this is solely duty of Crown Counsel. Are you able to speak more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was told the same thing, but the digital forensic expert who worked with me said to me, like, the criminal lawyer won't be able to represent you and they won't be able to testify in court, but in this case, it was a man, but he will know what will constitute charges and help you put the evidence together. It was prohibitively expensive. It took 7 months. We worked 11 or 12 hours a day. It was incredibly traumatic to do, but it changed the trajectory of the case and of my son's childhood, that I was able to do it. So we built evidence, and it should not be this way. This should not be that I had to pay to obtain justice, but that is what happened. And it's completely unfair to those who do not have the resources to do so. And on my own, I would not have had the resources to do so. I had family and friends who all pitched in whatever they could to try to keep my son safe.
Incredible support network.
Incredible. And every survivor could have the same outcome if they had that same support. And unfortunately, they don't.
Yeah. And did he ever try and contact you again after this went public?
No, he, from what I have come to understand, is very afraid of me now and does not want me to go to the media and does not want anything more to do with me. I think he's out of jail and has a very hard time walking around and living in society because people know what he did and yell things out at him. And I've been told stories of him being thrown out of restaurants and things like that. And again, the shame should be with the abuser, not with the victim.
Yes, agree. Thank you. This has been profound, and I do urge you to see all the positivity that you were getting in the chat after.
I will, absolutely.
And I don't know if you can see the hearts and loves or whatever floating up.
I do, and I'll just say that every survivor should receive the same amount of support.
And so that's, as we close up this session, is there anything you want to end on that you want to tell people, that you want to send them off with?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in this situation, I thought that my life was over. I thought that this would be the story of my life, that I wouldn't be able to leave, and my life is great. I wouldn't say that I'm the same person that I was before, but in some ways that's okay. And I am happy and I am safe, and my son is the happiest almost 6-year-old I've ever met. He's terribly behaved sometimes, but he's very happy and feels comfortable, being naughty and all the normal 6-year-old stuff. And I hear a lot of people talking about how trauma changes the brain, and it absolutely does. But I really do believe that healing and support and community change the brain as well. And so for everyone who's here today, it means a lot to me. And I know it means a lot to survivors who don't even know that this is going on, but that there are people in rooms advocating for them that they're not in, is really impactful. And the work that you're doing, Carrie, means so much. And I'm so heartened to know that so many folks are trying to help people like me.
And that we are. And so, Amy, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I speak for the whole organizing committee, that we're just so grateful for you here today. And yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you. And if anyone would like to reach out or talk about how they can provide trauma-informed services, I'm not an expert, but I'm an expert in my own situation. So,
and we need it.
thank you.
Amy put her email in chat, and we will send it out again because it's now full with so many encouraging, wonderful messages right now. So we will keep sending it out to everybody. And we will break for lunch. We will be back at 12:45 with the second half of yesterday's survivor panel. So everybody, take that time, take some deep breaths, and maybe get outside for 20-ish minutes. And we will be back in almost 30 minutes. So thank you all. And thank you, Amy. We're profoundly grateful for your time and for your talent sharing with us.